Thanks everyone for being here. I'm here with Laura from Siembra, hopefully I said that right, in North Carolina. And first of all, she's just going to talk a little bit about herself and what she does with the organization.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me, for inviting me to this digital space to share. My name is Laura Garduño, and I am an organizer with Siembra NC since 2017. And my role is organizing in the immigrant, mostly undocumented communities in some rural North Carolina counties, but also in some of the cities. So in Siembra, we are in 5 different counties, and our folks that we organize with are mostly undocumented, quote unquote, essential workers in this COVID economy. And part of the work that I have done has involved community defense from attacks on our community from ICE and other local law enforcement agencies that collaborate with ICE, and also pushing to advance local policies that will stop working with ICE, that will make the county stop working with ICE.
Right. That's great. And I guess before we get started, could you just explain a little bit about what it means to be documented or undocumented?
Right. Yeah, very important. I mean, basically it is a distinction, right? Like in my point of view, it is a distinction that makes it where people, or mostly workers, don't have workers' rights in the American economy. Okay. Because we're all contributing or all working or all forming part of this community, but because of lack of a documentation that allows for legal, quote unquote, legal employment, it targets or tarnishes this person as undocumented. And a lot of the burden is carried by the workers, but it is never, like, the problem is never with the employer who goes out of their way hiring, sometimes knowingly, undocumented workers so that they can maximize their profits, right? It is always, the burden is on the worker who's trying to survive and provide for their families.
So what's it like for the workers and how they get treated typically?
Yeah, I mean, it has been mostly workers have been the target of immigration detention, right? Always the threat of deportation is looming over the worker's head. So people are more likely to accept, right, poor working conditions, lower wages, harsher work environments. It's just like detrimental to a worker's health and their family's health. And it is mostly created, it is a creation to support the people who have more power or more riches, or, you know, have, quote unquote, the business owners, the business class, to have better profits.
Yeah, so it's exploitation for profit. Yeah,
right. And one of the things in the course of the time that I've been working with Siembra, we have supported a lot of campaigns led by workers who came forward with workplace discrimination complaints, wage theft complaints, where a contractor just blatantly refused to pay the wages that they owed a person who had completed the work. And so in total, we have been able to help people recover a total of $60,000 in 2019.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most of it has been because workers have been fed up, right? They said, no more. You shouldn't be getting away with this. Right. And we deserve our pay after completing our work.
Right.
And it's been very satisfactory because a lot of this work has been led by women, mostly undocumented women who are sometimes the sole providers for their families, and they really cannot afford to, just say that those wages are lost and, that they're not going to fight for them. Right. So it's been very, very motivating to see women lead.
Yeah, that is great. Yeah, that's good to hear. So what's the process for people when they're coming to America? What's the process that happens when they come to the border typically?
I mean, I think it depends on who we're talking about, right? If you're talking about someone like me, I came with a tourist visa and overstayed my tourist visa. Other family members had to cross the border either through the desert or smuggled through the international line, right?
Yeah.
And then there are other people who are seeking asylum, but that process is non-existent at this time because the Trump administration is using COVID, right, as an excuse to say, well, we're just not doing that right now because of precautionary steps.
Yeah. So yeah, that's COVID. That's like, so he's using COVID as a reason to stop anyone from entering.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the assault on the asylum seeking process has been happening over the course of time. Like we've seen it happening even since 2018 with the child separation issues going on, right? And where, people were just not necessarily know about how to seek asylum, and then the ports of entry were saying, well, we're just not doing that right now. So asylum seekers were denied the process. And that has been happening throughout the administration, right? But in this moment with COVID, and there are other organizations that are on the border that can better speak to this.
Right.
My understanding is that the flow of people continue to come to the southern border of the country, right, seeking refuge. And when they seek asylum, they're basically not given the process. And there has been this whole practice of putting people in hotels and including children in hotels because of the other facilities being at capacity, et cetera. Yeah. And so then they are the process is circumvented, and people are not giving the due process to have asylum hearings, and instead are repatriated to the countries of origin.
Can you talk a little bit about what 287G is and the sheriff and ICE collaboration?
Right. Yeah. 287G is part of a, and I'm not the best at knowing which piece of legislation it is. I save those for the policy experts.
Right.
But 287G is a program that allows local county sheriffs to have a role as federal ICE agents, or to start that process to detain and deport people and put them into ICE custody. And so in North Carolina, what that looked like was Alamance County Sheriff Terry Johnson to have a full program of 287G that deputizes or trains each sheriff to be able to wear two hats. That sheriff can wear his sheriff hat, right, and go out in the streets and pull people over for a traffic infraction or issue arrest warrants or whatever, and at the same time ask for a person's proof of being authorized to be in the country legally, right? Or ask their legal status. And that was problematic in the time that it existed in Alamance County, which is one of the counties in which Siembra organizes, because it was basically an entire program that was designed to arrest and deport local immigrant people and or the immigrant community. And so they would set up driver's license checkpoints, mostly in immigrant neighborhoods outside of trailer parks. And it would mostly detain, like a Latino person was 6 times more likely to be pulled over, 10 times more likely to be arrested, right? And then also in that time, 10% of the immigrant community was deported. So snatched from their family, snatched from their place of employment, denied due process and taken to Georgia a detention center in Georgia. That's Stewart Detention Center, which has a long history, long before COVID, of bad health conditions, lack of medical attention to the people in detention. And it's also the place where many people have committed suicide because of the dire conditions in which they find themselves.
Right.
So 287G, no matter to what degree, whether it's a full-blown program like it existed in Alamance County, to just a warrant service officer program, is going to yank people out of their communities, out of their homes, out of their families, and put them in deportation proceedings, which right now can mean a death sentence.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So deportation, probably in a lot of people's minds, they'll think, oh, you just go back to your country. Well, I'm assuming when a lot of people don't recognize the conditions in which their countries are in, which we know historically through hundreds and hundreds of years has actually been caused by US imperialism in the first place. So, that now they're, being sent back to these same conditions that, like you said, they could be killed, they could be tortured, they could be, which is why they've been seeking asylum in the first place.
And that is if they make it there, right? Like they're going to go back to the same unsafe conditions as before, the ones that they were fleeing: poverty, violence, rape for many women is a real threat in Central American countries. But also, there is a global pandemic. And so when people are in detention, and Stewart Detention Center, and this week, we heard about Irwin County Detention Center, there is just not enough space to social distance. And ICE has not been providing personal protective equipment for people in detention. So there is nothing that people in captivity can do to themselves to protect them from this serious threat, right? And then not to mention that ICE has been one of the leading reasons why there is such a large COVID outbreak in some of the Central American countries, because after deportation, people who have been in detention have tested positive for COVID. And in fact, they've transferred people who have tested positive. So they're super spreaders themselves.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, that's horrible. And I would like to get your opinion on, you were talking about, this intersectionality between, there's racial, there's gender, like this, and how, capitalism and profits work in this. There's so much, involved in this. And I wonder about your thoughts on, these allegations of, forced sterilization that has just come out for women who are in custody. Are you surprised by it at all, or what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, I think that my first impression was just rage at the fact that this is happening in all of the things that are taking place right now, right? To receive this news as a person who depending on what happens November, right, I could lose deportation protections. And Irwin Detention Center is the detention center where, if I were detained, if any of the people that I organize with were detained, and they're women,
right,
they would end up there. And so how real of a threat of, you know, how close we are to genocide is, I mean, it's hard to deal with. And then just even like, it's been a very difficult week in the mourning of the loss that these women have experienced, but also not certain, you know, like the fact that I'm not certain that I myself, or that other people that I love and that I'm in community with, that we can escape that is really difficult to deal with in the middle of a pandemic,
right,
in the middle of, you know, everything that is happening. It's just, it is not surprising. There is absolutely a long history of these, wrong, unethical medical practices that communities of color, right, have borne over the centuries. And then just to add it in this moment is particularly cruel, is particularly, you know, visceral for people like me.
Yeah, it sounds like you're overwhelmed and frustrated, and then you have this almost, I guess, like you're saying, this compound trauma, because it's you know, all of the issues together during also now the pandemic, you know, on top of everything. It's just so inhumane.
It is inhumane, and on the other side, it further makes us, you know, rally around the fact that no human being deserves to be in cages. No human being deserves to be in detention in this moment. It, you know, strengthens the call to say, free them all, because every human life is worthy. And, you know, these people that are in detention have committed a civil violation. They are not criminals, and they deserve to be home in a safe place. And their life is just as important as anybody else's.
Absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to ask you too, is there any myths that you wanted to talk about, or any stereotypes that you might want to address about what people typically think about people who are people? But in your experience, what do you think are the most inaccurate presumptions that people have?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we've briefly touched on them, right? Like the fact that people are coming to the United States seeking a better life, many of them seeking just a life,
right,
you know?
Right.
Because in the place that they are born in, it does not offer them a safe, healthy livelihood.
Right.
And they are doing what they need to survive.
Right.
And then we won't go into all the history that caused them to flee in the first place, but let's just take this moment, right? And the reason why they also deserve a good life. And so that would be one, right? It's like, there is no options for people who are like seeking asylum. There is no options for people to come to the United States legally. There wasn't an option for my family to come here legally, right? And so it is desperation, right? And it is just the reality that you have to say, like, well, I have to provide for my family, so I am going to have to do this. And many people, you know, they do cross the border without authorization or without inspection, and they do understand that is not the right way to do things.
Right.
But in order for them to live, they have to do that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that would be point number one. And then number two, when people are here and my father worked in the fields of Florida and worked in the fields of North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And many people are building homes, and many people are caretakers, and many people are going to school and just and some people are just being people living
Yep.
very plain and regular lives,
Mm-hmm.
and they are a part of this community.
Right.
And most of the people have been here, right, for over 10 years. So whether they're not just new arrivals, they have been here. We have children.
Yeah.
We have laid down roots, right? People have homes. Like, we are a part of this community, and whether we like to admit it or not, have been contributing to a system that is deeply interconnected, and our existence and our presence in this country has a lot of waves, has left a lot of small waves, right? Like the number of children that are in schools,
Mm-hmm.
the places of employment that have been created because of it, and enterprise, etc. We are here, and we are here to stay, whether we are physically here or not. Like, there will be generations of people that will still that are still going to be living in this country because we have arrived.
Right.
So, so to say that, it's like it hasn't just happened. There has been a movement of people, right, across these artificially created lines, political lines.
Yeah.
Right? And the movement of people has been happening long before this immigration crisis has happened, right?
Right.
We have moved across borders for many, many years. And to want to interrupt that flow hasn't been possible, and no artificial barrier has made it stop. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe that any other wall is going to make it possible to stop, right? There will always be a way. So all that I think to say is that our determination as human beings to survive and to aspire to thrive will always get us to the next place. And it has been true for Anglo people who expanded their way westward.
Absolutely.
And they were, they were seeking new opportunities and to reinvent themselves and to provide for themselves and their families too. Mm-hmm. And there is no difference between that westward expansionism and people trying to move north to provide for their families. Right. And then, the flow of goods and companies and manufactured goods is free flowing all across the world.
Right.
And movement of people should be free across the world as well.
Well, we live in a globalized world.
And then I think one of the things too is that there's a myth that people are, like I said, if they're in detention, they're criminals. Mm-hmm. And that is nothing further from the truth. For even ICE, in the percentages that they share on their website of people arrested with previous criminal charges or whatever, range from very small things like traffic infractions to, and they're not criminals, right? Like they do not just arrest criminals. They take innocent people with them, and people who are just going to work, people who are just trying to live. And it makes them no better than kidnappers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Is there anything else that you feel that's really important to talk about that we haven't mentioned that you would like people to know?
Yeah, I think, I think it's very important right now. Not that everything is going to be solved by elections, but the people who are elected representatives of the people, right, are very important in this time. I mean, I was motivated by the fact that Donald Trump was elected to get connected with immigrant rights organizations, and I don't know that it should be like I've shared how I've gone from pinning my hopes on the first term Obama administration, hoping that there would be, in fact, an comprehensive immigration reform delivered. And then knowing that, well, that didn't happen in the first term, and certainly didn't happen in the second term. And then knowing that my life was at risk with Donald Trump as president was motivating enough. Oh, maybe I should go back. I have seen how people elected into office can affect people's lives and can give us hope and take away our hope or trigger us into action. But I know ultimately that no matter who is in power, our communities have to keep building and have to keep shaping what it is that we want for ourselves. And so I would just say voting does matter, and people should vote knowing that Black Lives Matter, knowing that people should be free from cages, and that all people should be freed in this moment of a global pandemic from any detention, local, federal, whatever kind of detention. People deserve safety. People deserve a government that will safeguard the lives of all people. And people deserve a government that is going to be accountable to people, not to corporations.
Exactly.
And with that being said, if there are elections that are being held anywhere in the world, those are the values that people should be holding when they go to the ballot. And also, you know, we take care of one another. So no matter what is happening around us, whether there's ICE, whether there's police violence against our lives, we should be mobilizing to protect one another. We should be creating ways in which we fill the gaps that the government leaves behind in our lives. And so it is up to us, right, to say this is what we need. And if we don't see it, we should be creating it. And if we cannot create it, because I know that life is real and we have to keep on, or families need us, then we should be supporting organizations that are filling those gaps. And so, you know, whether it's supporting Siembra NC or supporting Galar in this moment, who was one of the leading organizations who unveiled the Irwin County detention involuntary hysterectomies that women went through. You know, we should be supporting Don Wooten right now, who is the whistleblower that brought these allegations forward for the world to know. We should be supporting her, defending her, protecting her, because she is at risk, and she has taken a great risk to protect more of us. So that's what I would say. We should be supporting the local grassroots and individuals who are taking on these great risks by sharing these stories.
That's great advice. Yeah, thank you. And I really hope that people who watched this have a better understanding of kind of what's going on and how to support each other, because that's what's going to get us through. It's about protecting one another and being there for one another and organizing, because we can't all do this on our own. So thank you so much for sharing and talking with me today.